Hello everybody. So first of all, thank you for signing up to our event today. It's really lovely to see so many of you here. First of all, an introduction to myself. So I'm Morven Lyon and I am the programme manager for an organisation called Community Shares Scotland. And I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a minute. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box in your organisation as we're going along. So before we begin, just to give you a quick overview of the format of the session today, I'm going to kick off with a 10-minute introduction to community business and the three partners involved in organising today. So we've got Community Shares Scotland, the Plunkett Foundation and Cooperative Development Scotland. I'll then hand over to my colleague Toby, who is going to speak to our case study groups, which I know is the main reason you are here today. We are very, very grateful to have them with us. Welcome. The running order is going to be Dunbar Bakery, followed by the Old Forge Pub in Knoydart, and then we've got Projekts MCR in Manchester, and then finally People's Powered Retrofit. The case study sessions are going to be in two parts. So first of all, an informal interview or presentation, and then followed by an opportunity for you to ask some questions. If you want to, you can pop questions in the chat box as well as we're going along. That will take us, I think, to about maybe 11 o'clock, 11:30, and then we'll have about 30 minutes at the end just to explore further elements in detail. We can keep the main space open for group discussion, or we can have breakout rooms for advisor-led one-to-ones. So let's get started. So as you know, or as I hope you know, today is all about raising awareness of community business. So how to set one up, how to run one, and the many strengths of the model. It's also an opportunity to hear about the comprehensive free support that's available to any group wishing to establish a community business. So first of all, what do we mean by community business? There is no one legal definition as such, but in my opinion, the key principles include, number one, communities being in control. So this is about local people being in charge of the business and democratically calling the shots. The principle of community benefit and need obviously are essential in terms of being at the heart of what the business is doing. So this is both in terms of products and services that the business is providing, but also in terms of profit distribution. So this is not about private individual gain. This is about trading for the benefit of the wider community. So community businesses, they do come in many shapes and sizes, which we'll hear about today. Just to say that primarily we will be talking about communities of geography, but the three partner organisations do support communities of interest as well. So just to give you a wee list, we have worked with community-run shops, community-run pubs, energy initiatives, breweries, distilleries, housing providers, community hubs, food and farming projects, the list goes on. And there is so much evidence that these community businesses have a significant positive impact on their local areas. So they can maintain vital services, they can provide employment opportunities, they stimulate a sense of pride and belonging, and in general, they contribute to the health and well-being of the residents. And the good news is that there is a mountain of free support available to any group who wishes to explore this potential of community business further. So as I said, we've got the three partners on the webinar today: Community Shares Scotland, the Plunkett Foundation and Cooperative Development Scotland, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a sec. And between us all, we have you covered. So to give you a quick overview of what we can advise on, We can help you choose the best business model and the best legal structure for your community business. We can help you access and decide on funding, including raising money through crowdfunding, through community shares or community bonds. We can also help you with your community engagement and marketing, including promoting a community share offer. We can offer lots of support around good governance and managing the daily ongoing running of your community business. And finally, we can offer specialist support in particular to rural communities. So the hope is that the partnership creates a one-stop shop for community business. We really want to ensure that there's a straightforward, streamlined service for clients. We've agreed that the first port of call will be us, will be Community Share Scotland, and we'll all put our contact details in the chat box and follow up with an email after the webinar. And then we will assess who the best person is to help you with your community business journey. Okay, so before we just jump into the case studies, just a very, very quick introduction to the three partner organisations. Firstly, as I mentioned, I'm the Programme Manager for Community Share Scotland. We sit within the Development Trust Association Scotland, and we work with any community in Scotland, so that's both geographical and of interest, who wish to raise money through our community share offer. For those who are not familiar with the concept, community shares are a form of crowdfunding, but they have community ownership at the heart. So community members are asked to invest into the community business rather than to donate into it. And what this means in practice is that these community investors become members of the organisation, and they're much more likely to care about the success of the enterprise and get involved with the day-to-day running. And what we tend to see that community share offers create strong, resilient, community-driven businesses that really do tend to thrive. I think that all of our case studies today have issued community shares at some point of their journey. Also, just to say that we are starting to pilot support around general donation-based crowdfunding and also community bonds, so we can follow up with that if that's of any interest to people. So there are three members of the Community Share Scotland team. We've got myself, we've got Toby Sanderson, who's the Development Officer, and we've got Katie Little, who's our Programme and Comms Officer. And between us, we can take you through every stage of the community finance journey. And like I say, we will put all of our contact details into the chat box and follow up afterwards. So first of all, I'd like to hand over to Suzanne Orchard, who is the Opportunities Manager at the Cooperative Development Scotland. Thanks, Toby. Maybe the partner organisations can put their contact details at the top of the chat box. So we'll put our website and our email addresses. So Suzanne, would you like to go next? I'll hand you over to Suzanne, who is Opportunities Manager at Cooperative Development Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Morven. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome on board today. It's a pleasure to be here and brilliant to see so many of you signed up. As Morven said, I'm an opportunity manager at Cooperative Development Scotland, which is part of Scottish Enterprise. However, for all of those Highlands and Islands and South of Scotland people that are with us today, through Cooperative Development Scotland, we are able to support Pan-Scotland clients. So don't switch off just because I've said that. Stay with me. So basically our support, we basically want to facilitate people to consider, think about and adopt fairer, more democratic, values-based business models that, as Morven said, place control at the heart of our communities and help to bring about, positive social change within those communities. So we're all about encouraging, inspiring, and helping people to actually adopt those business models that enable that to happen. We do this by providing a free advisory service to help you set up a community business. So it tends to sit at the earlier stage of people's journeys. We can help talk through some of the various business models that could be viable options for you, help you to assess those options, give you advice on the governance structure, and we can also provide all of the required legal documentation for your chosen structure as well. So as Morven said, yeah, the name of the event today, keeping it making it easy, that's what we intend to do with this service, by providing you with you know, advice from a professional, people that have been here and done this day in, day out, to talk you through these options. I suppose it's worth saying as well, I have mentioned that it tends to be placed at the early stage of people's journeys. So you could be looking at starting from scratch, looking into a new project or a brand new idea that you want some advice on what the best structure is to take that forward. But we do work with people who are perhaps already up and running. They've perhaps already taken over a business, but they want to look to transition to something, a structure that's more appropriate for the direction that you have in mind. So either way, we're here to help and would absolutely love to hear from you. Shall I hand over to Susie at Plunkett now?
Thanks, Suzanne. Good morning, everybody. I'm Susie Middleton. I'm a project manager at the Plunkett Foundation, and I'm here with my colleague Alison Macklin, who might give you a wave. She's community business team manager at Plunkett. And to tell you a little bit about us, we've been working for over 100 years to inspire and empower predominantly rural communities across the UK to find solutions to their needs through sustainable community enterprise. We champion and we support community businesses, and like Community Shares Scotland and CDS, we offer practical advice and training to help them reach trading stage and beyond, so help with succession planning when that becomes necessary, etc. And our community business team and our network of specialist advisors support all the models that Maureen mentioned at the start, so pubs, shops, cafes, farms, breweries, woodlands, bakeries, and everything in between, to really help them support their communities to address the issues that they're facing: isolation, employment issues, and generally improve community cohesion. And we also offer grants to support community businesses with their projects. I joined Plunkett last month. I'm managing a project which is funded to support community businesses who are looking to set up within places of worship. And there are wonderful examples across the UK of this really thriving, this model, and providing places of worship with a way to ensure they're sustainable. And many groups and churches haven't even considered sort of going into this sort of partnership, or just need a little help in getting it up and running. So we'd really encourage anybody who wants to explore that to get in touch, and we'll talk you through it. It's lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie, and thanks, Suzanne. So over to you, Toby, and we'll get going with the case studies.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, so our first case study was planned to be Joe from Dunbar Bakery, but I know Joe's having some connectivity issues. Joe, are you on the line at the moment? Not sure if you can hear us, Joe.
Hello.
Yeah, you're there, super.
Toby, sorry, I'm having the most insane, there are gremlins infesting my system, and I think I've just managed to make a little purple light come on, so all systems go. Right, okay.
Right, we'll crack on and hope that your connection bears out, but if not, we can pass on to the next part. But,
right, okay.
Is that okay?
Okay, right, so can we just run with this slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the background, and then when I say to go to the video that was made for the Plunkett Awards. Right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So, right, okay, well, Dunbar Community Bakery has been in business now for over 10 years. I'm Jo McNamara, who's currently the chair of Sustaining Dunbar and one of the founder members of the Community Bakery. And so Sustaining Dunbar is a community development trust, and we want to build a kind of resilient community and promote sustainability. So when the town's last of many family bakers closed about 12 years ago, we thought that this was a serious gap just in the business community on the high street, but it also offered us an opportunity to develop a community business, which I've kind of long been a fan. Back in 1981, I wrote my dissertation at college about community business, so back in the day. So I kind of well understand the kind of benefits for community business to solving social and economic issues in communities. So we set about the process of doing some research to see, is this an idea, could we make it happen? And kind of long story short, after kind of being able to receive a number of grants to do feasibility studies, we got money from leader funding to provide the fit out for a little.
So I think have we lost sound for Joe?
Sort of like across the community to see that people in the community would actually support this idea. So we decided that we would set up as an industrial and providence society to enable us to do a community share launch to actually get the additional capital that we needed to be able to get the business started. So off we went. We kind of put all those kind of nuts and bolts all in place, and then we sort of arrived at the point in time where we were going to have to open. And I think one of the things that we had not really kind of anticipated, working with a committee of volunteers who were all skilled, had relevant experience, but we had none of us ever run a bakery, and we were about to find out what running a bakery was really like. And so the process of kind of getting it right is an issue that kind of follows us. As with any business, you've always got to get it right, and it's never settled, it's never a done deal, so things are changing all the time. So that's
Sorry, I think that might be connection issues again. We'll just give Joe a second to catch up again.
Normally it's rural areas where we have an issue. You don't think Dunbar would be a problem.
She has actually come out of the chat, so what do you think, Marvin? Shall we wait a second, or shall we? Let's
give her 1 minute, and then if she's not back, then we can just move to the next one, I think.
I do see she's back in the chat now, so.
Okay.
Joe, can you hear us again? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
God, yeah, right, okay. The connection, it just dropped out again. I thought it had improved. So are you able to show the video?
Yeah, sure, we can. Yeah, we can go. Let me just. So hopefully this syncs okay for everybody. It does have subtitles, so if your audio isn't in sync, you might be better just muting it and reading along. But hopefully it works okay for everyone.
In Dunbar Community Bakery, we specialise in sourdoughs, yeasted breads, morning rolls, Scotch pies, sausage rolls, savouries. We are the community bakery. Our name is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But to the community, you have your regular customers every day. The customers come in and say, "Morning, Colin," you get morning back, and that gives you satisfaction in your job that you know you're doing something right.
At the moment, we're over 1,000 shareholders. They decided to do a survey on what people wanted with the local business.
All of the businesses, all of the shops on the high street are offering a social service because they make our high street, and that's the heart of our community. But what makes us different is that perhaps I think we have a kind of a wider set of aims. It's not just that we want to provide something that people want, but we have a set of aims, for example, that we do want to create employment, which is something that we've kind of done very successfully here. I think at any one point in time, we'll have 7, 8, 9 people working for us on the shop front. We employ 3 bakers at any one time. So that's quite a lot of jobs to be created.
Hiya. We've got white rolls, brown ones, or they're seeded brown, or we do have ciabattas, but they're more like a crusty chew. The bakery itself, we get like a lot of different kind of customers. You know, you get your regulars who come in for just 1 or 2 things. It's just a really nice place to work.
The winner of the Horace Plunkett Better Business Award, Beauty Bakery.
Plunkett Award was really brilliant because it gave us an opportunity to tell a success story. It was a platform for us to present the work that's happened in the bakery, kind of giving us a profile in the community, you know, making people think, oh, you know, that's something for us all to be proud of. It's our community business.
A lot of people, you know, have been coming in for years and just saying it's nice to see it sort of go from strength to strength. But it was really nice to be recognised with the Plunkett Award.
What the Plunkett Foundation does is really, really important, and I think it would be great that more people know, because people, that's, you know, they're not aware of it. They don't know that it can be done. So to see the work that's being done and the brilliant work that people are doing, so to give publicity to that, to inspire other people, I think it's fantastic.
That's great.
Okay, so so I kind of pick up from the video there, to say that I think in a way it kind of answers some of the questions that you were asking, Toby, about okay, you know, what kind of makes us different, and does this kind of model of being a community business, how does that help? And I think one of the things that we kind of really appreciate at this point in time is that small independent bakeries are closing. The pandemic has hit people really, really badly. And that's not to say it's hit, you know, local high streets, people's pockets. So it's fragile. Running a small business is always fragile. But we've survived. We've come through in good heart. Our community is still supporting us. We're launching a share issue at the moment to gain funds, because we want to do a buyout from the land fund to buy the bakery and train apprentices. This poster up here kind of tells the story. And so I think the support that we get from our community means that we can tap into that when we need it, but as a community business we can also access other means of support. So for example, our pastry break that had been turning out sausage rolls and making the pastry for 40 years finally gave up on us, and we were able to go to a local community fund and say, can you help us to replace this piece of equipment? So I think that's the kind of support that we can tap into that enables us to keep going. Sometimes it feels like it's kind of against the odds, but were we a privately run business, then I think that support would not be available to us, and it would make it harder for us to survive. So I think that definitely there are all sorts of advantages there. That the commitment that the kind of staff show to the project, and the commitment of the community as well, is helping us to kind of survive tough times. You know, it's not a done deal, but we're hanging on in there, and with, you know, bright ideas and kind of looking at sort of like how we can build more of what we're already doing. So do we think, so like Dunbar is a very particular community, and I think it's a community that's kind of very rich in kind of social capital, we'd call it. People are very enthusiastic. They like to get out there and make things happen. There is a sense that people have always been community minded. We're a little town kind of, you know, right there out 30 miles from Edinburgh on the edge. And back in the day, people, if you wanted something, you know, you wanted something for your community, you had to do it yourselves. So that kind of, you know, resilience kind kind of runs in the genetics of Dunbar as a community. But I think in terms of have we created something that is a model for kind of other people? Do people understand community business in a different way in Dunbar because of these examples? I don't know whether it's something that kind of sits in their minds, that it's a concept that's kind of absolutely understood. But I think if you look at the kind of connection between what we kind of see as being kind of community business and the kind of, the resilience of communities in the past, where you had to do things, you had to have that kind of control and responsibility, then there is maybe something that's kind of just kind of in the air that kind of supports that approach that people have in the community. And I think certainly there's a lot of awareness. It's kind of gained a kind of a critical mass. I think the work of Sustaining Dunbar over the piece has kind of brought that very much into people's consciousness, because of a number of initiatives that Sustaining Dunbar has kind of brought into being, that have all been about tackling these kind of issues around the community, but a lot about kind of creating projects that people are running themselves to address the kind of issues there and improve the quality of life in the community. And so our kind of plans for the future is definitely kind of around the idea that we want to truly be able to realise what has always been one of our aims, but has been, I think, as a small business, kind of compromised, because taking on apprentices and training them, it's something that we've always done. We've always worked with young people. I think over our 10 years of operation, we've trained and nurtured about 30 kind of young people. They've kind of moved on out there into the world. But we need the resource to be able to kind of truly be able to kind of formalise the training that we give young people. So that's why we're trying to buy the bakery at the moment, because if we can wipe out our rent, then that gives us that little bit of financial security that one is helpful in kind of the stormy seas of the current trading environment, but also enables us to do this thing that we want to really make sure that there are kind of opportunities for young people to get into that kind of world of training and work.
Super, fantastic. I think we can probably now take some questions, Joe, if that's okay with you. I think that's a really great introduction to everything you're doing, and it's exciting to hear. I think you're interested in that you're probably the society that's been around for the longest out of the four speakers we've got today, and you do have that history of trading, so there's a lot that people could really learn from in how you've done things. So we've got, I think, about five minutes for questions just now, and then we'll hear other speakers and we'll have more time for questions at the end. So if anyone does have any questions for Joe, please put your hand up or mention in the chat. Andrew Laverty.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that presentation. I think I heard that you had 1,000 your shareholders. I'd just be interested in how much your capital you actually raised, and the typical amount of contributions for each of the 1,000 people.
Right. Okay. So over the piece, over with the thousand children, it's right. I'm not entirely sure exactly, because it's happened over a period of 10 years. So kind of quantifying that. But at the outset, we raised about £50,000 from the initial share offer, and we also had some people who were what we would call kind of patient investors. So they made us loans, which we have just about finished paying back. So we probably had another £50,000 in loans that were kind of offered to us, interest free and payback, as you are able to. So I think that's once again one of the things as a community business, we've been able to kind of tap into that support from people. It's certainly, when we were looking initially at going to get money from loans through banks that were supporting community business, we would get a loan that wouldn't be available to us if we had approached one of the mainstream commercial banks, but we would still have to pay back the commercial rate of interest. So that was why we pleaded, we put out a call to the community, and people responded to that. And so at the moment we're looking to raise another sort of like £10,000 to contribute towards the Scottish Land Fund application, but also because there's kind of ongoing maintenance and things that need to be replaced. So I think
with the size of the investments, you know, a few people putting in £5,000 or £10,000, and
yes. Yes.
£100.
It ranged from people, so like people just kind of making, at the moment people are making donations, you know, they come in, you know, with kind of, you know, small change in their you know, and say, here, you know, here's for your funding. So it ranges from that to people who sort of like will make, you know, £10,000 as a possibility. We might get a donation of that amount. We've recently had £1,000 from another local business. So, you know, it varies, but it covers the, you know, the entire range. Some people made loans to us of £25,000. Yeah, but when we put the kind of share offer out, we started our share offer at £50 for a share, and then over the piece we've kind of reduced that to, we feel it's like £25. You know, is more affordable for people. And if people can afford more, then they do pay more. But I think, you know, at the moment our kind of shares are kind of going between 25 to sort of like £50 is the kind of average size of the donation that's being made.
And I think as well, just to say, from recent Community Share Scotland cases, the average contribution for shops and pubs especially, the average has been about £200. That's from a minimum of usually £25. So there's obviously quite a range in that, and that involves some people putting in big sums of money into thousands and quite a lot putting in the smallest amount, but the average has been about 200 fairly consistently. We've got another question from Graham Marshall, and then we'll take one from CJ Howe, and then we'll maybe take the rest at the end, if that's okay. So Graham, would you like to ask something?
Good morning, Suzanne, and thanks very much for the presentation. What's been happening in Dunbar over the last few years is quite inspirational, and I hope we can follow it in Hoyk in the not too distant future. Two questions really. One is, had the Community Empowerment Acts been in place when you started, would you still have chosen to go the community share offer first and then acquire the property later, or would you have done it the other way around?
I think we would still have taken the approach that we did, was that sort of like we felt that sort of like the community share offer at the outset, we would raise a realistic amount of money, and so as a kind of a process that was achievable. So I think had that been available to us. That's a really interesting question, because I think had it been available at the time, we certainly would have considered it, absolutely. And I think, you know, it is something that we're kind of looking to using that as a way of absolutely kind of securing our survival into the future, because as I say, you know, it's very fragile out there at the moment. Small bakeries are closing, you know, across about at the moment. One of the kind of trade papers kind of quoted recently that about 50% of the kind of, you know, bakeries in Scotland are kind of on the edge, closing down, on the edge, threatened. So you know, we feel it's kind of a really important thing in terms of the local economy, but it's just a kind of a draw, keeping people coming to the high street, because we have these developments on the edge of town of, you know, more you know, corporate development round the town. And the heart of our community, what makes it a, you know, a brilliant place, is that kind of those local, the connections on the high street. It you know, it is a kind of consolidates our community network, and we think that's really important.
Thank you. The other part to it was in terms of return. First of all, what sort of return are people getting from the community shares? Because it is a form of income. And the other part of it is the comment you made about lots of donations. Is there a place for creating a method whereby people can put very small amounts of money into, let's call it an organization just for sake of this question, and the organization then becomes a shareholder?
Right. Okay. That's okay. That's a kind of another kind of interesting approach that we sort of like we haven't really considered. The first point of sort of like what benefit there was to the shareholders was that we were offering a 10% discount at the point of sale. To shareholders. Recently, because we're in a much more difficult trading environment, we've kind of looking at kind of refocusing that, so that the approach that we're taking is that it's not at the point of individual each sale, but there's a kind of a loyalty card scheme, so it accrues over a period of time, but people still get that benefit. I think we want to actually kind of make sure that kind of benefit is open to actually all of our customers, because we want to use that to kind of, it is a loyalty scheme, so we want to encourage those repeat purchases, but we're looking at finding other ways of developing special offers for our shareholders that will kind of give them that kind of added benefit. But I think people, given the kind of the size of the level of shares that are being purchased, I don't think people are looking at it as a form of investment. They're not looking at it to get a return. It is very much about the community benefit. And that kind of point then, that's sort of like if all of those small donations could be kind of accumulated by a particular organisation. I mean, that's an interesting idea as well, but not one that had actually occurred to us.
And that's something that might be mentioned by the next speaker, because group memberships were sort of part of the Neudart share offer. So I think we'll probably speak to Davey about that, and we can see more about that there. CJ, how do you still have a question for Joe?
Yeah, just a quick one. I just wanted to ask what sort of size of community that you have, that your target community, so to speak.
Well, over the past few years, there has been a substantial amount of new house build around Dunbar. So I think when we started out on this project, there would have been about 9,000 people in the community, but I think we would now be up to about 12,000 and building. There have been about 500 new houses built in the area, so that's kind of substantially increased the population, and there's kind of more to come.
Yeah. Thank you.
Super. Okay, thank you very much, Joe. That was great. And we'll share everything that you've seen today, folks. So we'll share the video and we'll share the recording of this meeting, so you can watch all that back. But thank you very much, Joe. And we'll now move on to hearing from Davey Newton. And Davey's here with us from the Old Forge CBS in Neudart. So people might have seen recently that the share offer in Neudart raised, well, Davey will tell us, but $250,000 through the share offer. One of the quickest share offers we've ever seen, I think. It seemed to have met its targets within a week, and it's just gone on to even more success since. So Davey, would you like to tell us just a little bit about how things started out, and some of the history of the Old Forge?
Yeah, but yeah, success in share offers hasn't quite yet added up to buying the pub, but we'll maybe get to that. So I don't know how much people know of us or where we are. We're in a small peninsula, west coast, small community, 110 people really, but quite a iconic situation, both sort of for hill walkers, land reform stuff, and with this small pub in the middle, which became iconic in its own right through the 90s and the early 2000s. It had been a sort of a local club for a while, and then it became a pub. And then it was bought by the previous owners, Ian and Jackie, who ran it very successfully for 25 years. And sold it really at the height of their sort of powers in 2013. was bought by a new guy, JP Robinett, who wanted to turn it more into a gastropub, or what he felt was a gastropub. Odds and ends of long-term problems with his ownership, mainly around levels of service, and then ending up shutting all through the winter, which was something that hadn't happened before. So had a real impact on the community, both during the season and out of the season. He decided last February to put it up for sale. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but the community is quite used to community enterprise and ownership. So we own 17,000 acres of land in the hills behind us. We run a community forestry operation, which is very successful. We have trained subsidiaries for both companies, and we had just come out of a £500,000 successful extension and redevelopment of our hall, which included crowdfunding and lots of activity. So reasonably confident, I suppose, as a community going forward, that we were able to achieve things. So this pub came up on the market, and we decided to put our heads together and see if we could find a way to acquire it. We knew the costs were going to be reasonably high. It was put on offer for offers over at 425,000, but that was a bricks and mortar price. So it was a business, and the owner would want a goodwill payment. So I suppose initially we expected to be having to raise about 700,000, 800,000, because we were aware of redevelopment issues, maintenance issues, stuff that had to get done, and slightly unrealistic expectations on the goodwill. So that creates a problem for a community of 100 odd people to try and get together a sort of a funding requirement of £700. We had to create some sort of funding plan that took on board that we would have to have different parts of income coming into that funding plan. Mm-hmm. Obviously, to buy a property, the first stage is to look at Scottish Land Fund options, but we were aware that would only pay for the bricks and mortar cost, or a percentage of the bricks and mortar cost. Wouldn't pay for anything to do with stock, wouldn't pay for anything to do with goodwill, and we'd only pay small amounts towards redevelopment, mainly on essential works. So we decided that we were going to have to go down a joint Scottish Land Fund shares issue and crowdfunder route, which is where we've ended up. In the meantime, latterly then, we also did a community ownership fund application, which was successful as well. So between the four of them, our crowdfunders just started, but is nearly reached its stretch total already. We've taken in just about £1 million so far, and it seems very. It seems like it's very, very successful. But of course, the more money we get in, the more money the present buyer wants, because he thinks we've got lots of money. Our money is very strongly article. Our money is sort of, it's not as much as you think it is, because quite a lot of that money is kind of set aside for some of the redevelopment costs, which grew quite substantially as soon as we went anywhere near architects or building experts, shall we say. So we haven't got as much money as it may sound, and we still haven't bought the pub. I suppose for this discussion, one of the main issues we had was how to balance a Scottish Land Fund application and a shares issue. The Scottish Land Fund requires obviously community-led development. At the lowest level, it requires 51% of all shareholders or members to be within the local postcode or the designated postcodes. Obviously, we couldn't stretch that very far, so the number of shareholders, of normal shareholders, was going to be limited by the area that we live in. So shares at the first level were never going to make a huge amount of money. So we recognised quite quickly that we were going to have to balance type A and type B shares, and that type B shares were going to have to be very high valued. Now locally we're in a reasonably good situation for high value shares because there's a few high value property owners in the area. So we knew we could address some of our finance issues by getting some of those property owners into a share issue, which is what happened. Then we were struck with the next problem on the balance side, was that we didn't know whether we would need a community right to buy or not. And in some ways we still don't. But the requirements for a community right to buy are slightly higher in the Scottish Land Fund. So you would have to have 75% of the shareholders or members being resident. So that made it tighter on our share issue. So we were very keen to get as many people as possible in the community to sign up, and we managed to get about 70 people in the community to sign up, which is, given that at least 12 people in the 110 are under 15, it's quite a high sign-up rate. And then we managed, for some reason, to get the required about 20% of our total share issue are type B shares, and they all signed up at £10,000 each. So we raised 256,000 on our share issue. So that was all very successful. And
I think it's probably worth just highlighting there some of the sort of technical stuff you mentioned there about maintaining eligibility for Scottish Land Fund and having to have that split of local and non-local members. That is something that both Cooperative Development Scotland and Community Share Scotland can offer a lot of advice on. We've had a lot of groups go through that previously. So if you've been listening to that and thinking it all sounds a bit too technical, don't worry, because there is a lot of free support there to help you through that process. But that is one of the requirements of Scottish Land Fund, as Davey says. Sorry, Davey.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
And obviously we did get a lot of support through the Plunkett Foundation for getting our articles correct, and through Toby and Community Shares and building up the share issue and the prospectus, especially for the share issue. And it was all help that was required. You know, it wasn't something, it was all new. Notwithstanding that we come from an area with a large backdrop to community involvement, there was still an awful lot of learning to be done in this, and it's not to be underestimated, the support that you get. So that's all that. I suppose where we are now, I suppose the next step sort of thing, and where we are, the next step obviously is a buy. We've got offers in just now, and we've just put a second offer in. Our owner is not necessarily the easiest person to deal with, but we knew that right from the start. But our offer is in. We think it's more than realistic and more than generous. The next thing after, if and when we buy the pub, is and what we're starting to work on now, is this sort of recruitment and business planning. Our business plan was worked up through the first stage Scottish Land Fund application through consultants out of Skye, out of Portree. and it's quite robust, and I think it certainly helped us with the community ownership fund application. But it certainly needs a lot of tweaking now, and also we need to schedule in all the redevelopment work, some of which is essential works that really we can't open without, or even if we could open without, it would be very disruptive to the opening. So we've got to schedule in our works, we've got to work through our recruitment, which in a small community can be quite difficult. Got to work through our accommodation requirements, which are quite huge, certainly from year 2. And we've got to schedule in how all that works with the business plan. And again, all this is learning. The group that's been running this is it's 10 of us that have been running it, 9 of us that's been running it. And we come from all walks of life, including the previous owner of the pub. But actually, it's probably been just as much a learning curve for her, in that the outlook of the pub going forward is obviously going to be more community focused, more sustainable, more to do with sourcing from the right areas, and more to do with the return to the community, rather returns for the community and the communities of interest that are associated with the pub. So it's all new and all a bit scary. We're getting there. I don't know if that's enough just now. Do you want questions?
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. I did have a couple other little bits that I wanted to share just before we do questions. So obviously, you mentioned that you'd raised that 256,000 from the share offer itself, which alone is an amazing achievement. I think that's a huge amount of money for a community the size of Knoydart. And then obviously you've gone on, you now got the crowdfunder live, which I think Jackie's put a link to in the chat. So if anyone does want to go and support, go and find the crowdfunder. And I just also wanted to highlight that the media coverage that you had was pretty incredible. I think for quite a small Scottish community to get the level of national media coverage that you did was quite for us was a little bit unexpected, I think, but it seemed to really grow arms and legs, the share offer at one point, and I think everybody was speaking about it at one point, which was really amazing to see. So thank you very much, Davey. And do we have any questions for Davey now? I think I saw one hand up. Sorry, just trying to find Jennifer O'Hagan.
Yeah. Hi there, Toby. It's Jenny O'Hagan here from Port Bannatyne Development Committee. And David, I've already had a call with you, and it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a fairy tale. And for us, we in Port Bannatyne again are doing a community share offer for our local pub, the Anchor Tavern, and we're looking very much to you guys as a benchmark, although, as I say, we're aiming significantly less, but it's wonderful to see what can be done in such a small community. Things are going well with us as well. We're a week in, and we're a third more. I think we're nearly 40,000, and we're looking to raise between 50 and 105. So it's wonderful too, and we will be doing a crowdfunder. But the question I had really, David, was around the fantastic uptake you've had in the local community. 70 odd out of 100 or whatever is wonderful, or more even. And at the moment we are still on target, but it's a bit too close to call at the moment. It's like about 55% to 54% type A shares, and we've got still a lot of people in the community that need to waken up to this. And I wondered how long it took your community to get behind that. In the first week, did you have as many, or did you have to do something special to try and get them on side?
Well, not put too fine a point on it, the present owner did the prep work for us. So, and also because it's such a small community, I suppose, and the pub is such a central feature. It literally is right in the middle of the village, and it's such a high impact when it's closed to all the businesses, not just to us who like a pint, but to all the businesses. Yeah. It was quite obvious, I think, to the community that things had to change. So the step from that to it being a community ownership model, I think we had the right people on the board who could qualify people's insecurities about that model, because the previous owner was on the board, and a couple of new residents, one who'd been an accountant, were on the board, so they could allow people to see it with slightly different eyes if there's any worries about the community ownership model in a business setting, which I think there is sometimes. And also we've got the backdrop of reasonably successful community ownership stuff anyway. So I think that made it all a bit easier locally than it maybe does in some place like, well, I don't know Port Ballantine well at all, but obviously it's not all focused in one small area in the village. So I think we were lucky in that sense, and we're lucky that our previous owner was.
Yeah, I mean, we've still got a few weeks to go, the 12th of December, and it's the Christmas light switch on this weekend. Again, we're going to use that again to get in amongst the community, and we're trying everything at all. But I'm really impressed by your numbers, and we still have got a number of key people that we still have to hopefully sign up. And I think once we get that, there's a few key people in these wee small island communities. You have to work hard to get the right people on side, and then there's a bit of momentum. So.
But also, I think if you can encourage the people who can't really afford it as well. So we had a great sign up from people who were just coming in at the minimum, because and you know every sign up's worth well for us anyway, every 3 sign ups was worth 1 of the type Bs, and we really hammered that message home and got people who didn't think they could be part of it to be part of it.
No, absolutely, and I think it's a useful tip. We're also looking at perhaps gifts as well for some people that we know in the community. So that's great, and I'm sure we can pick up again with you later. But thanks very much, really helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. And Maureen's put a link to the Anchor Tavern share offer in the chat. So if anyone wants to learn more about the share offer Jenny mentioned.
Yeah, thanks very much, Morven. That's great. And again, I would just like to thank both Toby particularly in us getting where we were, and the Plunkett Foundation. We couldn't have done it without you. It's really brilliant. Thank you.
Super. Thanks very much. Andrew, do you have a question for Davey?
David, again, your great story. I'm involved in the Eriskay Heritage Centre. So Eriskay is a similar sized community as you. It's about 140 residents. We've actually bought an old school, and we want to convert it. It's a bit of a ruin, but it can be saved. But the community's actually bought it, and now what we have to do is raise funds to develop it. We're going to try and tell the story of Eriskay, where Bonnie Prince Charlie arrived, so part of the Jacobite Rebellion, the impact of the Highland clearances, the politician. Everybody will remember the film Whiskey Galore. So it's a great story you have to tell, and a very important story to tell for Scotland, Highlands and Islands. We are kind of looking to, we're just starting off, pulling together our business plan and raising funds. So we'll probably be looking to raise funds, probably just a bit more than you have, David. My question is all around the shareholding of A and B shares. What are the rights associated with those different types of shares, and how much did you raise from each issue?
Okay, so correct me, Toby, if I'm wrong at any point, because I might be.
Yeah, well, Davey, if you want, I can cover the kind of technical part of that if then you want to speak about it. Yeah. So. Andrew, the way we had to set it up was obviously SLF have requirements around both majority membership, being majority local membership on the board, and also certain controls for the local members. So the Type A members who were resident in Knoydart had to be a majority of members at all times. They had to be a majority of the management committee as well. And the quorum at any meeting is also dependent on a majority of local members being present. So that's the main difference. And really it does mean that the Type B members, as we've called them in this case, they're sometimes called supporter members, they are members and they still have voting rights, but they do have that slightly diluted influence because there always has to be a majority of local people and to kind of outnumber them in a sense. The Old Forge didn't use these particular rules, but we also have a set of rules called the Dtas hybrid rules, which have been set up mostly with an eye to development trusts, because Community Share Scotland is part of the Development Trust Association, and those were set up so that development trusts that are already existing in the community and already have an existing reputation in the community, they have a vehicle to take forward a community share offer. So we can actually add in an extra layer of protection for the local community, where not only you have that majority local membership, but you also have a very strongly represented development trust who take what's called a community anchor share, and can have certain essentially veto power over certain changes to the rules and certain amendments that really embeds that strong community governance. But in the case of the Old Forge, it was just that split between Type A and Type B members.
Okay.
And sorry, I was just going to add in a couple of wee things there. One was quite often, well, we were very used to the idea of membership being regulated by residents, by residency, because that's what we have had to do with, and that's what we want to do with all the other community organisations. So that was something that wasn't a big surprise to us and wasn't something that we had any quibbles over. So the Type A membership, that is, and that being in the majority all the time, that was what we aspired to anyway. The thing that was new to us, I suppose, was the Type B membership, which isn't something that normal articles of association in a scale or something which is defined by a community of place. Those articles normally don't really have Type B members, and so that was, they have other members, normally organisations as far as I can make out, but they don't really have Type B members. So that was a new thing for us. And the other thing about the anchor share, so one of the surprises, I think, for people when we started out on this, was for people outside Knoydart, was that this wasn't led by our development trust, effectively, which is the Knoydart Foundation. And that was an active decision by us to not use that as a model and not use that as a vehicle, because we felt that it was going to create more of a problem than a solution. It might have created some solutions for the funding model that we could have applied, but it was going to create a problem further down the line for the development work and then the business operation. So we felt that we had to keep them away from the anchor share model, or keep us away from the anchor share model. Don't know if that helps.
And did you raise more money from the A shares or the B shares?
So it's about raise more money from the B shares, because the B shares were, because they were so strictly limited, were £10,000 or more. So there's about, I think, 17 B shares, and the rest is in A shares. But the A shares still raised over 70,000. You know, so the average, and again, Toby might correct me if I'm wrong if he knows the details, but the average is still, from the locals, was still about £1,000 each. And we had locals who you never knew how much money they had under their bed were coming out with it, because we're so invested in the idea. So it was a high average, given what was mentioned earlier about share averages in communities as well. But the range was still from £25. Type Type A range was from £25 to, I think there's maybe one Type A that's £10,000.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any more questions for Davey? I think it's best if you use the raise hand function, but if you can't find that, you can put it in the chat as well.
There's one in the chat there from Graham. So Graham's asked why the Development Trust headline in the move might raise problems further down the line. There was two sides to that. One was of capacity. So the Development Trust at present is one of the subsidiaries has just finished a major, or just 3/4 of the way through a major hydroelectric scheme, which serves the Bay Area with electricity. There's a housing plan which involves building up to 15 houses in the next 10 years. They've just implemented a new venison production line, which they were in the process of doing at the time. We're also running the shop and the post office through a trading subsidiary. We also run campsites and holiday accommodation, and there's a hostel that needs redevelopment. So capacity within the structures of the sort of employed structures of the Development Trust was limited. But also it would have meant probably setting up another trading subsidiary to a charity. And over and above all that, there was this possibility that we could find ourselves needing to do a community right to buy, and that would have created broader discussions that were necessary. We wanted to keep that discussion very focused on buying a single asset, rather than that discussion being broadened out to buying lots of assets. So our articles tried to focus the CBS towards development related to the pub, to narrow down any community right to buy discussion, which hasn't happened. It hasn't had to happen yet, but like, as I say, we're still in the back of our head. Is that okay?
That's absolutely super. Thank you very much. I see your ambitions greater than ours. You're not just looking to take over half the community.
Well, oddly, we started off with just being left with it. You know, well, not left with it. There was, like, in 1999, there was quite a lot of, you know, obviously we had to work quite hard to get to where we were in 1999 and later. But what we got from that community buy was basically infrastructure liabilities, and we've tried to make the best of those infrastructure liabilities, and now we're getting to the point of having actual assets that hopefully will work to the good all round. But yeah, it does sometimes seem like everything's getting focused on community ownership. Not everything. There's plenty of other independent businesses here, which is great, but yeah.
But yeah, you're still an inspiration to the rest of us.
Well,
absolutely, I would agree with that.
Thank you very much.
Super, thanks very much, Davey. I feel like we could probably talk to you for the whole session and learn a lot, because I think there's so much in the way you run your share offer that especially Scottish communities can learn from. So I would encourage people to go off and look up more information on it, and we're happy to speak in more detail about it. But I am conscious that we've got other speakers on the line that we also want to hear from. So thank you very much, Davey. And I think now we're going to move on to John Haynes from Project Manchester. So Project Manchester is a community-owned skate park in Manchester, obviously, and Morven and I were lucky enough to visit last month on a practitioners meet up with the kind of community shares standard mark practitioners. We got a guided lesson, first time ever standing on a skateboard, and kind of saw firsthand what they do. So I think, John, have you got a presentation to share?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so I think you should be able to share your screen. Yeah, you're a co-host now, so you should be able to share.
Brilliant. Can you all still see me as well? Not that you really probably want, not that you want to necessarily. But, so thanks so much, Toby, for having me and the partnership. It's a real pleasure to be speaking today, and it was lovely to meet some of you the other day as well, and have the opportunity to share a bit about what we've been doing over in Manchester. And to teach you and to see you all learning to skateboard as well. It was really exciting, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. So Projekts MCR was set up in 2004, and it really came off the back of skateboarding being banned in Manchester city centre. So the council issued a bylaw in, I think, 2001, which banned skateboarding in certain areas of Manchester. So if you skated there, you could be prosecuted. And in other areas of Manchester, you could be prosecuted if somebody complained about you skateboarding. So it's a real kind of roll of the dice for anybody wanting to skateboard anywhere really in Manchester city centre. But the council internally, there was somebody lobbying really for the skateboarders, saying, you know, you really need to provide something for these guys. And so before I was involved, somebody built a skate park, and then it went out to tender as to who would run it. And at that point, I was part of a group called Projekts MCR, so no change there. We basically, to cut a long story short, got permission to run it under a service level agreement with Manchester City Council. Now, initially, it was just this relatively small wooden skate park, and we would sit outside in the freezing cold under the Mancunian Way flyover. I don't think I've mentioned that yet, but we're literally underneath an inner city motorway, next to some big hotels, but also on the edge of one of the most socially deprived areas in England, an area called Ardwick. But really, there's a number of areas surrounding Ardwick as well, which fall into the top 10% most deprived areas. And so we started out with this ambition to serve the skate community, and it was relatively straightforward ambition. We wanted to provide a safe, welcoming space for skateboarders to come in. But as Joe was saying in the first talk, which I really loved, you know, we'd never done this before, and neither had she, and you never really feel like it's finished. You're always problem solving, and we had so many problems. I mean, the first one, we opened in, I think it was August 2004, and very rapidly you see the light diminishing, and you're thinking, well, we're only going to be at that time we were only allowed to open from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was the council didn't want children to play truant and come and skateboard. So whether they would or wouldn't, I mean, it was fairly debatable. I think it's highly unlikely personally, but anyway, you know, you get about an hour of skateboarding before it got dark in the later winter months. So, you know, we started off trying to get funding to expand with power, so getting floodlights, and then further down the line, we managed to convince some major funders, Sport England and another major funder who no longer exists actually, called the Youth Capital Fund, to expand the size of the skate park. We knew there was high demand for skateboarding. We didn't know exactly how high, but something happened to the skate park in 2009, which reduced its capacity. Somebody set fire to one of the bins that we had, and it was such a colossal fire that when the fire extinguishers were put on it from the fire service, huge chunk of concrete fell off one of the Mancunian Way flyover bridge columns. So obviously the highways department wasn't very happy about this. So they said, right, you've got to move your skate park away from the bridge columns, which at that point it was kind of wrapped around. And so we shrunk the skate park by about a third. And this was the interesting thing. We saw an immediate drop in the number of people visiting the skate park each year. So on average, it dropped. Now, you didn't see queues of people outside before, so there were no obvious signs that we were operating at capacity until this happened. And we thought, actually, somehow people kind of know that we're smaller and they can't fit as many people in. And so we've seen a reduction. So we convinced Sport England on that basis that if we tripled the size of the venue, of the skate park, that we'd be able to triple the number of people coming in. Now, at that time, we had 6,000 visits a year. After a year after the expansion, which cost about £500,000, we saw 18,000 people visiting the skate park. So that was very satisfying. Now, to come on to kind of what structure we are, because I think that's something that seems to be really, it is important. We're a cooperative. We're a different type of cooperative than we used to be. We used to be something called a Cooperative Consortium, and I'm still not really 100% sure what that means. But we weren't really very satisfied with having that kind of business model. And that's partly because we felt like we weren't really operating according to the rules. And there's been a lot of changes in our organisation. The person who was previously operating it, I think, didn't really fully understand what it meant to be a cooperative. And so we had to make some tough decisions about what we wanted to be. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second, because I've inserted another slide here, because so many people were asking about the crowdfunding and community share issues. I thought it might be worth mentioning this. We expanded in 2020 the facility based on the information that I just explained, that as we grew in capacity, we saw an increase in the number of people visiting the skate park. We felt that might be possible to continue, that we felt that the demand was still high enough for us to carry on expanding and increasing the number of people coming into the venue. So we started drawing up plans and pricing up for this new expansion project. And as part of that, we did a community share offer. Now, the community share offer ran for, I think, about 3 months, maybe two months. I can't exactly remember, because we kept extending the deadline, because at the very end of the deadline period, people just kept dumping more money in. And so we thought, okay, well, let's just carry on for a bit longer and see what happens. And in the end, from individual donations or investment, we raised £64,000, but we also had an agreement with, I think it was Power to Change, and some connection with Co-ops UK as well, and locality, something called the Booster Scheme, which match funded every investment, so doubling the amount of money that we could raise. So all in all, we raised £134,000 through that process. We also received funding from Power to Change, from Sport England, and from the Veolia Environmental Trust. And we borrowed money from social investors through, I think, ultimately through a kind of big society capital. One of those was called GMCBO, which is a local organisation, a kind of umbrella organisation for third sector organisations. And the other one was the Co-op Foundation, actually. I get mixed up with all the different cooperatives, so excuse me if I've making an error on that front. And that allowed us to build this. It was phenomenal. It went a year overdue. It was probably the most stressful thing that in fact, certainly the most stressful thing that I've ever done. And it's had an incredible impact on what we're doing, on the community that we're serving, and on our sustainability. Expanding the facility by 50% did in fact result in a 50% increase in the number of people using the facility. And it's created an incredible community hub in an area that would normally be considered a kind of no-go area underneath a flyover in a city, in a very urban environment, right on the border. In fact, it is the borderline of Manchester city centre. In fact, when we first started working there, a girl was stabbed under there. This was before we had this skate park wrapped around that area that you can see now. That was just when we were just a wooden skate park. And cars were dumped there, and prostitution happened around there as well. So the local community has told us that they feel safer walking around their local area because of the skate park being there. So that's really exciting for us. Now, there's another photo of it. Toby's asked me to speak about some of the work that we do in terms of outreach work. We, like I said before, we're a skateboarding community, kind of a development organisation, and we want to help people get access to skateboarding. And when I first got into skateboarding, it was predominantly male. And when I say predominantly, it was almost 100% male. And in the first few years of operating the skate park, we'd probably get somewhere between 1% and 2% of the total number of visits in a given year from females. So females represent just that very small fraction of the total number of visits to the skate park. Well, we asked some of the men why they felt that was the case, because I was surrounded by men, so I thought it'd at least be interesting to see what they think. And they said that women can't skate, so which I suppose was true, but why weren't they skating at that time? And they suggested all kinds of silly ideas, actually, that they weren't brave enough, that they weren't courageous enough, that they weren't strong enough, or they weren't aggressive enough to skateboard. What we noticed, though, was that this wasn't the case in schools. We were doing a lot of schools work, going out to around 15 to 25 schools a week, delivering coaching sessions, teaching people how to get on skateboards for the first time and building community clubs in these schools. And we noticed it was almost 50-50 between males and females. So we asked the girls in those sessions why they didn't skate, and they said, well, we don't come to the skate park to skate because it's so male dominated and it feels extremely intimidating. When we skate in that environment, the male skateboarders skate really hard, they skate really fast, and they skate really close to us, and it's extremely intimidating. And so we put on something called a girls' night, which is basically is what it says. It was completely exclusively female, so we didn't let any males into the skate park during those sessions. We had coaching available. We saw 3 areas that might be barriers to people accessing the sport. One was lack of equipment, one was lack of coaching, and one was, this is for females at least, was the fact that it was male dominated. So we created this exclusive session, and you can see from the graph there, I think you can probably see that. It's just grown and grown since 2012 when we started the sessions. We're expecting this in the next 12 months to have about 9,000 visits. So increase from maybe about 90 or so, maybe less than that in 2012. So it's just been an astronomical growth. And they now represent women, that is, or females generally, represent about 35% of the total number of visits to the skate park. And it's one of the things we're most proud of that we've achieved in the organisation's history. But we do reach out to other groups as well. We like to ask who's not using the skate park and why. It's very easy to open a facility and just say, what's the market? What's the size of the market? How many people are doing this activity? And just be reliant on that group of people as a source of your income generation. Whereas we said, well, how many people aren't skateboarding but might want to skateboard? And how can we give them access to it? And one group was, apart from girls, we noticed adults were a very relatively small minority of the skate community as well. So we put on adults classes too, and they've been really successful as well. And we've been really excited to see that. In fact, a company got in touch with us recently. I think they're called Bucket, not quite sure how it's pronounced. And it's basically a kind of couples activity session. So they got in touch and said, can we kind of have a discounted rate for our users to come and do couples skateboarding? So they come in little groups of 6 in these couples and come down as adults to learn to skateboard in the skate park. And they say it's extremely high demand. So again, it's really gratifying to see that kind of thing and to see skateboarding reaching such a raft of people. The schools works possibly the most important work that we're doing, if we can say that one thing's more important than another in this sense, but I think it is, because it reaches children from deprived communities across Manchester who would otherwise not be able to get access to the skateboard park or the skate park. And that's partly financial, but it's partly other social factors as well. It's easier for us to do it through schools. We provide all the equipment, we provide the coaches, and we send out these wonderful coaches who are so passionate about what they're doing. We've got such an amazing team here. There's about 26 of us in total, a mixture of full-time and part-time, and they're all very, very passionate about sharing skateboarding with people across the local community and the wider community as well. Yeah, one of the things we love is that seeing the smiling faces, seeing people learn things for the first time, especially something that is actually quite scary. People overcoming fear is just amazing to watch. The elation, even what we might consider a relatively easy maneuver, the cheers that go up from the children who do them, it's absolutely amazing, and it keeps us motivated, and it keeps us pushing and pushing to do more. Now, I realise I'm kind of running close to time. So we do a lot of volunteering. We've only just started doing the volunteering, actually. We tried it a while back, but one of the funny things about getting volunteers involved in the organisation is that it requires a certain amount of resources to manage volunteers. And when you don't have those resources, despite the fact that volunteers actually kind of create resources themselves, activating them isn't actually that easy initially. But once we got into that position where we'd opened the expansion, we had some funds available to support the growth of the organisation through that initial launch. We were able to activate volunteers. Now we've got 8 active volunteers, and 2 of them have now moved from being volunteers to being regular coaches. They've been requested by parents to do one-to-one classes for their children. So it's really exciting to see that happening. So yeah, just to come back to our legal structure, I know I kind of launched into it earlier, and hopefully it didn't confuse too many people. But yeah, we weren't originally a BENCOM, a Community Benefit Society, and I was personally really struggling with this because I felt that we were being disingenuous as a cooperative. Whilst we were doing stuff that was benefiting the community, and we considered ourselves a not-for-profit organisation, I didn't really feel like we were involved in the community in the decision-making process. And actually, even right now, to some extent, I don't feel that we're doing that as well as we should be doing it. And it's something that I'm excited about developing in the coming months and years as we learn how to be better doing that. But anyway, we went through this 2-year process really of exploring what legal structure was going to serve our aims and objectives most effectively. And we didn't want anything that was going to be overly burdensome. So essentially, we didn't want to have to serve the structure, that we wanted the structure to serve us. And we had these kind of with these goals. I was looking back at this actually in light of this talk, just to kind of remind myself the process we went through. So we were serving the community, so we wanted a structure that really tied us into doing that. We weren't, as it turned out, a not-for-profit officially, or legally. We didn't have an asset lock in our previous guise or of our previous version of our cooperative. It wasn't until we spoke to a consultant who specialises in business structures that we actually recognised that. We wanted it to be manageable, affordable. Actually, interestingly, just after we became a BENCOM, the FCA reduced the annual fee to 0. So it became extremely affordable to be a community benefit society. And we wanted to be fundable as well. We wanted it not to get in the way of us receiving funding from large funding bodies in particular, like Sport England, like Power to Change, like the Big Lottery, because we would access funds from them quite frequently well, I say frequently, but not infrequently at least, to do the kinds of sessions to launch new projects that we were piloting. So yeah, so that's the process we went through, and eventually we came right back to being a cooperative, and we realised that at the very heart of what we were, the BENCOM suited us best. Now, so I've been asked to talk about what's next, and we've finished off the skate park really under the flyover. It's an amazing space. It's had the impact we were expecting it to have. It's grown the number of people using the skate park. It's made us financially sustainable. There is still more space under here, but not very much. There's another 400 square meters that we might be able to grab at the very end, but whether it's worth doing is another question. But I do want to expand our education program. We developed something called Physics Through Skateboarding, and I'd like to expand that wider to something called Science Through or STEM Through Skateboarding. using skateboarding really as a hook or a vehicle to help people learn STEM subjects, so science, maths, physics, science and maths subjects. So that's something I'm pretty excited about. Expanding our reach into schools, again, something very exciting, training up more coaches, but also building a new facility somewhere. We love the fact that we're outdoors, and I think that's one of the real features of our skate park that makes it so attractive to people. But we're confined by the Mancunian Way flyover, really. As soon as we stretch out beyond that, then the skate park gets quite wet because it rains a lot here in Manchester. So I'm exploring now where we might go next, and I'm in discussions with the national governing body about what that might look like. So yes, we don't know what's next, but I think the demand's extremely high for skateboarding, and I think definitely there's scope for building more amazing community skate parks in the UK. So that's the end of my little presentation. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, John. That's really fascinating. And I think we were really keen to speak to you just because we felt that you kind of showcase what's possible with community business. I mean, it's not just the things that people might traditionally have thought of as community businesses. This can be a model that's useful for any non-profit organisation, any community enterprise, and I think you show that it's not just those shops and pubs and community centres. It can be anything that you can kind of mobilise a community behind. So I'm a little bit conscious of time just now. I want to make sure we leave enough time to hear from Jonathan, but I think we've got time for a couple of questions just now, and then we can come back maybe at the end if there's time to take some more questions. But does anyone have questions for John at the moment? Marlene.
Do you know, John, has there been any reduction in delinquency in the area as a result of having such a splendid facility for kids to use?
The simple answer is I don't know whether that's the case, but I do know that there's been a reduction in drug dealing in the immediate area around the skate park, and I know that because we no longer see people literally shooting up outside the skate park and underneath the bridge. There used to be a road that separated that old wooden skate park from that new concrete skate park that you saw. But the recent expansion closed that road. Now that road used to be a hot spot for both prostitution and homelessness, so people sleeping rough under there, and drug taking, and we get in in the morning and often find it in a real state. So that it's reduced it in that area. The problem is that kind of thing probably just moves somewhere else, I imagine. So I don't know where that problem may have gone to. Yeah, delinquency wise, I'm not really sure. Really, we haven't looked into the crime figures, and also if we did, it's difficult to make a direct association with it being, I suppose, causally related to the skate park. So I wish I could be more precise on that, but unfortunately I can't.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Any more questions for John at the moment?
John, I've got a quick question about your management committee and how much it's changed over the years, or has it stayed fairly consistent?
Do you mind our board of directors?
Yeah.
It has changed, thankfully. I used to hate going to board meetings. Honestly, it was the worst experience. I just felt like it was, well, without getting into too many details, it wasn't very supportive, let's put it like that. And leading an organisation is quite challenging. I think as anybody knows from leading in that direction, it's a lot of responsibility, and sometimes you don't know what you're doing. You're trying to find people who do know and can help you. And we had so much support from various external organisations with our growth over the years. It's been absolutely amazing. But yes, in the end, I brought somebody in, and it was agreed amongst the board that was going to be a sensible move, and they really helped us they helped the board to start recognising what their role was more towards not just supporting me, but because it's not just saying yes to the CEO or yes to the MD. It's about supporting, but also challenging in the right way. And And I think that was lacking certainly in the early years. But for the last 6-7 years, the board has been on the whole pretty good, and I've been grateful for the support that they've given me. But we still want to make improvements on the board. In fact, we're going to be recruiting for new board members in the coming weeks. Yeah, because I want to bring somebody onto the board actually who's got some experience in cooperative governance. Somebody to take on the secretary role, because at the moment I'm the secretary, but my mind isn't really built in the way to be a decent secretary. I think there's a lot of rules, a lot of kind of, you want to be focused on trying to make sure that things are done properly to protect the organisation and the people that you're serving. And yeah, I'd really be excited to see that be developed in projects, and really pushing us to do the kinds of things, and to even know the scope of what's possible within that kind of sphere of being a community benefit society. So yeah, there's definitely room for growth in that area, and it's an area I'm quite excited to see grow in the coming weeks and years.
It's really interesting. Yeah, good governance is just so essential, isn't it? And getting the right people with the right skills on the management committee.
Yeah,
say it's harder sometimes where people are living in tiny remote communities. I guess you're maybe lucky in that you live in a city and you're also a community of interest. But yeah, it's something that Community Share Scotland and the other partners can help support with as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you very much, John. That's been fascinating, and I do wish we had time for more questions, but I would like to hear from Jonathan first, so we might come back to you at the end if that's okay. But for now, we've got Jonathan Atkinson on the line, and Jonathan works for the Carbon Co-op, who are an advice and advocacy agency for the low carbon movement, and they have been involved in setting up the People Powered Retrofit, which is an ongoing share offer at the moment. Well, Jonathan, would you like to tell us a bit more about what it is and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, totally. And I will just post a link to the share issue in the chat. But yeah, we're just about funded, which is great. Yeah, and it's been fascinating and fantastic to be here and hear about the different community share issues and all sorts of things. And like, I really love the governance and the really technical, interesting side of things. So I'll try and expand on that. I'm also aware of time, so I'll keep it brief. Yeah, so Carbon Co-op, we're a community energy organisation, but unlike a lot of similar organisations that arose at the same time as us, we established about 15 years ago, we incorporated 10 years ago. We're not a renewable energy cooperative, so we're not an organisation that came along to install an asset or raise capital to buy out an asset. Instead, our focus is very much on climate change and is about acting as a cooperative really for householders who are interested in taking action in their own homes and their own communities to much reduce their carbon emissions. And we've been involved in the delivery and the development of lots of innovative different things, from energy systems and demand side response and all sorts of technical stuff to advocacy and putting citizens at the heart of the energy transition. But really the most of the stuff we've done over the years has been retrofit. So that's retrospectively fitting energy efficiency improvements to existing homes to reduce their energy demand, improve their environmental performance, and also improve things like the health and well-being of the people inside the homes and the comfort as well. And we've done lots of work over the years, and a lot of that work has involved our technical partners, Urbed. Now, you don't need to know a lot about Urbed. Essentially, they're architects. Yeah, maybe they could have a look at the pub in Noida, I don't know. But yeah, they're architects, and they're a worker co-op as well. And really, a lot of our success in retrofit has been that collaboration between a worker co-op with a lot of technical expertise and a community energy organisation with a lot of engagement. And over the years, we've done lots of different piloting and development of retrofit. But we realised 3 years ago that people were really keen to have an end-to-end service because we were raising a lot of awareness, doing training, but people weren't progressing on through their retrofit journey. And there was some funding from the UK government as well available to help develop markets for retrofit in specific local areas. So that really fitted with us because it was a local element. They also wanted trusted intermediaries like ourselves, and they wanted the technical expertise as well, like Urbed had. And from that, we built People Powered Retrofit, which is an end-to-end service for householders, helps them through the process of retrofit. We don't do any of the contracting work, but we offer services, technical expertise, advice and guidance. And it's a fee-earning service, which is a bit different to what Carbon Corp have done in the past, which a lot of our work had been grant funded. Now, over the 2 or 3 years of the pilot, we developed a really good service and had lots and lots of interest. And this time last year, in fact, we were left with a bit of a kind of conundrum. What should we do with all that knowledge and learning? We had a lot of people wanting to buy our services. We were a bit overwhelmed by demand. We had to keep stopping and pausing along the way. And so that's what drew us towards the community share issue. Now, community shares, obviously we know all about it, but personally, I've been involved in the buyout of a community bookshop in the place I live, which is Glossop, outside of Manchester. And that was a 50 grand raise. We worked with 150 householders. We got some help from the booster program that we mentioned, which is an English program. But it also gave me a really good understanding of the process, understanding of how it worked and everything. We then went through a business modeling exercise with People Powered Retrofit, and it quickly made me realize that with capital, we could expand the capacity of the service that we're doing, that we could meet that demand, and we could also, generate new income. I suppose the issue here is that this is a service. So what we're capitalizing here, we're not doing a buyout of bricks and mortar. We're not investing in a wind turbine that has a 25-year kind of income stream. We're developing a service, and we're looking to capitalize that. It's perhaps more analogous to like a capitalist kind of way of doing things. Many people do this, every day. It's often in the private sector. They raise funds either through equity or debt to finance a business idea that they have. Our business idea is built on like the 10 years of incorporated work we've had, the 3 years of the pilot, and our projections and our business model. But yeah, it's different to that investing in bricks and mortar. Interestingly, from the technical side of things as well, the way we've constituted this was to create a new community benefit society and to capitalise that. So it's People Powered Retrofit Limited, new BENCOM, putting it out there. One of the things we've done there as well is include an ownership option for both Urbed and Carbon Co-op as like the progenitors of this new organisation. And it's a trustee, it's a custodian trusteeship, which is what we built into the governance rule at incorporation with advice from Cooperatives UK. What that means is that the mission of the organisation, the new organisation, is owned and guarded by these custodian trustees. So it's one place on the board for both Carbon Corp and Urbed, and any change to the rules requires the consent of Carbon Corp and Urbed. So we thought that was a nice way to preserve the kind of community and environmental and climate change mission in a way that also enabled like new members to come in and new people, owner investors to come in as well. And it was accepted by FCA at incorporation and Co-ops UK as well. So yeah, we've gone through the process, done the business planning. We had some great support from Cooperative Culture, which is a very small cooperative kind of consultancy with a couple of people. Mark Simmons, maybe know some people in the farming sector. And we've gone on the FX platform. Our optimum is 550,000. Our minimum 200,000. That's kind of the bare minimum we needed to keep going. We're just about at the minimum with a week to go. The
page there.
Oh yeah, we're nearly there. And we actually have some people coming in, so we think we'll make it, no problem, and maybe work somewhere towards our maximum. I asked very quickly, a couple of questions were asked of me by Community Shares Scotland. What's the environmental and social impact? Clearly there is like a climate change, carbon emissions, and also a health impact there. I think it's very interesting though, and there's a bit of a tension here. Within cooperative and community sectors, there is an emphasis on delivering things for people who may be in fuel poverty or maybe on less means than the rest of us, you know, and a kind of assumption that you should work for those people, you know, the poorer people, let's say. And indeed, we had some challenging discussions with the booster, and the booster decided not to invest in our share issue because of this. Our response to that is, we're a trading organisation. We need to generate income. We need to find a model that works for us. There are lots of people, some of the richest people are responsible for the most carbon emissions, and our mission is to reduce carbon emissions. We think from an environmental justice point of view, those people should put their hands in their pocket and make this happen. So there's a business model for us, there's an income generating for us, and we think there's an environmental justice thing there for us. Also, from a fuel poverty point of view, you're often asking people with the least resources and least means to somehow kind of either pilot or put their money in, put their hands in their pocket, this sort of thing. Really, from a social justice point of view, it's the state that should be both providing for those people, but also equally distributing resources across society, you know. And there's a limit to what cooperatives can do meaningfully in that space, other than make that case a political case for the redistribution of resources within society. There's also, so that's like environmental and social impacts. There is kind of carbon impacts. In terms of the social impacts, there are some there because there's knowledge and learning, but then there's a wider issue here about, you know, the role of co-ops and the role of the state. In terms of BENCOM and why we chose BENCOM, we like the community benefit society model, not only because you can capitalise it through community shares, which, you know, is great and has come actually through corporate activism from community and cooperative activists over the years. I think we should recognise that 15, 20 years ago, there were a small group of kind of committed, geeky, cooperative governance people that said, we can use this model to capitalise all sorts of projects. But also community benefit society includes both members, you know, and there is a cooperative member aspect, but the wider community as well. And there's interesting guidance there from the FCA all around not economically privileging members above the wider community. And from a climate change activism point of view, we like that idea that, yeah, we work with members and we're responsible to them as owners, but we also have a responsibility to the wider community. And the community for us, you know, in climate change means not just Manchester, not just UK, not just Europe, but, you know, the wider world, you know, as it is. So yeah, and at the moment, just like what are our plans for the next stage, really, and I think this is the advice I'd like to give to people, is a community share issue is a means to an end, not an end in itself. And I've also worked with people who've been in this position of getting money and saying, where do you go next? We've spent our entire raising period building the capacity, like already bringing staff on board, because we know now we've got a huge challenge of delivery. So we've been doing a lot of that work now. And a lot of that work will just go through the next, you know, years to come. So it's a whistle-stop tour, but there you go. And yeah, happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Super. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And yeah, again, I think this is a really exciting one. It feels like you're doing something really new and innovative in a space that really needs that. So yeah, lots to look to there. I want to take questions. I'm just a little bit conscious of time. I know we've run over a little bit and that some people might need to get away at 12 when we were scheduled to finish. So before we take questions, I just want to say another big thank you to the 4 speakers we've had. So Joe from Dunbar Bakery, Davey from Old Forge, John from Projekts MCR, and of course Jonathan. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's been really valuable. But yeah, just wanted to squeeze that in. Obviously, if people want to stick around, we can run over a bit. But if anyone does need to leave, we completely understand, and we'll share the recording and the slides and everything afterwards. So thank you. And any questions for Jonathan now? I think there was one in the chat that Morven's picked up. So Graham had just asked about the requirements of the Scottish Community Right to Buy legislation and whether a BENCOM with rules that involve a restrictive clause with another body having permission to block rule changes, whether that's possible within the Community Right to Buy legislation. Obviously, this is quite Scotland specific, Jonathan, so not for you.
No, it comes into lots of different things, you know, not just that context?
Yeah, so yeah, Morven's answered the Dtas hybrid rules that we spoke about earlier do include that sort of provision. So they would allow the community anchor shareholder to have that level of influence, but they're still community right to buy compliant.
And part of our provision in there is to say that it's time limited, and that we will, not a specific time limited, but we will look to disinvest from that trusteeship over time as the mission becomes hardwired. And for me, it's about establishing a culture within the new organisation, because there's always that time where we're bringing in another 300 new members to this organisation through the share issue. They might have quite radically different ideas about what it's about. So we're hardwiring it from the start, and then in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we'll take that away.
Any more questions for Jonathan or for the other speakers? We do also have the CDS and Plunkett and obviously Community Share Scotland staff on the call. So, I mean, we can really open up the discussion now to anything anyone wants to raise. And we do have the option as well to break off into breakout sessions if people would like to do that.
Toby, could I just, it's Suzanne here at Cooperative Development Scotland. Could I just take the opportunity while everybody's still on? I think we've heard about all sorts of different legal structures today, and there's been mentions of many others that aren't present. So, you know, we've mentioned SKIOs, we've mentioned BENCOMs, we've mentioned worker co-ops, consortium co-ops. Yeah, the list is really far and wide, but I think it might just be worth mentioning, because I know when I first started out learning about all of this stuff, it became a minefield really quite quickly. But I think it might just be worth mentioning that, you know, there's a spectrum here, and there's a place for everybody on it, and trying not to get too sort of caught up in setting out and wanting to be a BENCOM or a SKIO or a co-op. Have those conversations with specialists and people that have been there and done it, and really be open-minded about what might work for you. What I will say is that a legal structure and a governing document are two separate things. So your legal form, your legal vehicle that you adopt is what sort of body you know, it will be in the eyes of the law, and your governing document is a statement that will lay out how you plan to operate and govern yourself. So you can, for example, be a BENCOM and a cooperative. You can be a KIC and a cooperative. So try not to get too lost in I want to be one or the other. As I say, it's a spectrum, and there's many hybrids, and there's ways of setting up legally and ways of governing and running yourself that can coincide very well together. And everybody here, in terms of the partners on the call, can help navigate that quite tricky journey alongside you. Thanks, Toby.
No problem. And a question from John in the chat about if anyone has experience issuing a bond. I assume you mean a community bonds, John, and what might be the benefits over and above issuing community shares. I mean, I'm happy to speak to the sort of technical answer there. We haven't done it firsthand, Community Share Scotland, yet, but it is something that we're starting to offer advice on, and that we're sort of looking for pilot projects in. The main difference between community bonds and community shares are that community shares are a form of equity, and people who buy shares become shareholders, they become members, and they have voting rights and influence that way. A community bond is more of it's debt. It's sometimes called peer-to-peer lending, and it's just a financial contribution, so they wouldn't have those voting rights, they wouldn't have those membership rights, and the financial terms tend to be a little bit stricter in that the payback is more set and the interest rates are more set. So it can be a really good way to bring in especially investment for a particular purpose and for maybe a shorter period of time where you do expect to pay people back, but not to have that ongoing influence that they might have otherwise. Does anyone else have any experience there that they'd like to add? like I say, it is something that Community Shares Scotland are really keen to support and to explore a bit more. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that, please get in touch, because we are on the lookout for some sort of pilot projects that we can work with.
Just to maybe add as well, the other end of the spectrum, we're piloting, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, donation-based crowdfunding support. So where it's not an investment, and folks are just offering a donation into the enterprise. So we've got a live crowdfunding campaign at the moment with a group, Scotland the Bread, which I'll pop in the chat in a sec. But again, we're looking for a couple more pilot projects to figure out exactly what support Community Shares could offer that would be valuable in that field as well. Great. I think if anybody has anything else they want to add or ask or say, then now is your moment. There were a few folk that did ask for breakout spaces, so please do follow up with us. We'll send an email with all of our contact details. Very happy to come and chat to you in person, set up a call, set up a Zoom, and that's all 3 organisations can do that. So yeah, anything else anyone wants to say before we sign off?
Just lastly, from me, Morven, I think as Morven said at the beginning, this is a one-stop shop, and I think rather than try and remember which of the partners we're on and which would be applicable to you at whatever stage you're at in your journey, we agreed, you know, there is no wrong door, but we agreed that if you want to use Community Share Scotland as your first port of call, in terms of inquiring, we all work really closely behind the scenes, and they will make sure that your inquiries filtered through to either myself at CDS or one of our contacts at Plunkett, if that's more appropriate at the stage that you're at. So CSS is a first port of call.
That's
put another
that's
link
a
in
good
the
point.
chat there, just for the kind of shared page
brilliant.
they'll have.
Lovely, thank you so much, everybody. It's been so nice to see so many folks on the call today. And as Toby said, thanks again to the case study speakers. Without you, we wouldn't exist. So very grateful to you.
You're brilliant.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll call it a day then. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.